When Abu Bakr lay dying and the whispers began about who would succeed him, there was one name that made the people of Medina tremble: Umar. The man was a giant, literally. Historians describe him as towering over the crowds, so tall that when he sat on a horse, his feet nearly touched the ground. The companions were terrified. Talha and Zubayr went to Abu Bakr and asked, "What will you say to your Lord for appointing Umar over us? You know how harsh he is." Abu Bakr on his deathbed didn't flinch. He said, "I will say I appointed the best of your people over them." The fear was real. The Muslims have just lost the gentleness of the Prophet ﷺ and the soft wisdom of Abu Bakr. Now they were staring at a ruler who in the days of ignorance was Islam's greatest enemy, a man who once set out to kill the Prophet ﷺ with his sword unsheathed. Yet this man, Umar ibn al-Khattab, would go on to become the architect of Islamic civilization. Under his reign, the call to prayer would echo from the deserts of Arabia to the snowy mountains of Persia and the fertile banks of the Nile. But his story isn't just about conquest. It's about a man terrified of his own power. A man who conquered the world, but feared that a mule stumbling on a road in Iraq would be his undoing on the Day of Judgment. Today, we look at the second Caliph, the Faruq. Let's find out. To understand Umar the Caliph, you have to understand Umar the convert. He was born into a chauvinism of Jahiliyyah, high-spirited, proud and violent. When Islam first arrived, he wasn't just indifferent, he was an antagonist. He was the barrier that kept Muslims praying in secret, hiding in the shadows of the house of Arqam. But then came the prayer of the Prophet ﷺ, "O Allah, strengthen Islam through Umar." And strengthen it he did. When Umar accepted Islam, everything shifted. He didn't hide, he went straight to Quraysh, to the very assembly that plotted against the Muslims, and declared his faith. For the first time, the Muslims prayed openly at the Kaaba. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud famously said, "We were unable to pray at the Kaaba until Umar became Muslim." His Islam was a victory. He was the Prophet's shadow, but he was also a man of spiritual intuition. The Prophet ﷺ said about him, "In nations before you, there were men who were divinely inspired. If there is such a one in my nation, it is Umar." He also said, if Satan sees Umar walking on a path, he takes a different path. And now that the same man was standing on the pulpit, looking out at a sea of anxious faces, his first speech as Caliph wasn't a promise of wealth or glory. It was a warning to himself. He climbed the pulpit and said, "The flock is like a camel pierced in its nose. It follows its driver. As for me, I swear by the Lord of the Kaaba that I will most certainly lead you along the straight path." Umar inherited a war on two fronts. The apostates were defeated, but the empires of Persia and Rome were waking up. In Iraq, the situation was dire. The Muslims had suffered a catastrophic defeat at the Battle of the Bridge, a disaster caused by haste and a refusal to listen to counsel. Men drowned in the Euphrates River. Umar didn't rage, he learned. He appointed Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas and gave him advice that sounds more like a spiritual guide than a military briefing. This is war, and the most worthy person for it is he who is deliberate. Then came the Battle of Qadisiyah. The Persian Empire threw everything they had at the Muslims. Elephants, heavy cavalry, the legendary commander Rustam. The battle was a meat grinder. The dust was so thick it blocked out the sun. But the Muslims had something the Persians didn't: spiritual unity. There is a famous incident recorded in the history books involving a commander named Sariyah. While Umar was delivering a sermon in Medina, hundreds of miles away, Sariyah was being ambushed in Persia. Suddenly, in the middle of his sermon, Umar shouted, "O Sariyah, the mountain, the mountain." In Persia, Sariyah heard the voice, moved his army to the mountain, and won the battle. It was a moment that defied logic, a karama of Umar. The Persian Empire broke. The Muslims entered the White Palace of Khosrow. They found wealth beyond imagination, carpets made of silk and gold, crowns of sapphires. And here is the contrast. The Persian general Hormuzan was captured and brought to Medina. He wore his silk brocade and a crown of jewels. expecting to meet a king in the palace. Instead, they pointed him to the mosque. Hurmuzan went in and saw a man sleeping in the dust. Hurmuzan asked, "Where is the guard?" They replied, "He has no guard." Hurmuzan looked at Umar and said the famous words, "You ruled, you were just, so you were safe, and so you slept." While the east was falling, the west was opening up. Damascus, Homs, Aleppo, city after city opened its gates. But one city was different, Bayt al-Maqdis, Jerusalem. The patriarch, Sophronius, refused to surrender to anyone but the Caliph himself. So Umar traveled from Medina to Jerusalem. But he didn't ride a war horse. He rode a single camel, sharing it with his servant. They took turns riding, 1 hour for Umar, 1 hour for the servant. As they approached the city, it was the servant's turn to ride. The Muslim commanders, Khalid, Yazid, Abu Ubaidah, came out to meet him. They were dressed in silk brocade to blend in with the Roman elite. Umar saw them and exploded. He picked up stones and threw them at his greatest generals, shouting, "How quickly you have changed. If you were to do this after 200 years, I would replace you." They had to explain it was just armor camouflage. Only then did he calm down. When Umar entered Jerusalem, he was walking, leading the camel while his servants rode. The people of the city were stunned. This was the conqueror. He wrote a treaty that is still studied today, the Pact of Umar. This guaranteed their lives, their wealth, and their churches. He promised that no cross will be destroyed, no church inhabited by Muslims. When the time for prayer came, he was inside the church of the Holy Sepulchre. The patriarch invited him to pray right there. Umar refused. He said, "If I pray here, the Muslims after me will take your church and turn it into a mosque," saying Umar prayed here. He walked outside to a patch of waste ground which was the site of the Temple of Solomon. The Romans had turned it into a garbage dump. Umar knelt down and began cleaning the filth with his own bare hands, collecting it in his cloak. The other companions saw this and joined him. That is where Al-Aqsa compound still stands till today. Justice, foresight, and humility. But Umar's reign wasn't just victories. In 18 Hijri, the year of ashes, famine struck Arabia. The ground turned black from drought. At the same time, a plague, the Black Death, ripped through the army in Syria. This was the plague of Amwas. It killed the best of them. Abu Ubaidah, the trustworthy of this ummah, died. Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan died. Umar traveled to the Levant but turned back when he heard the plague was still raging. When asked if he was fleeing Allah's decree, he famously replied, "Yes, I am fleeing from the decree of Allah to the decree of Allah." Back in Medina, the famine was biting hard. Umar made a vow not to eat meat, ghee, or butter until the poorest of the Muslims were fed. His skin turned dark from hunger. His stomach would rumble loudly in the mosque during prayer. Umar would tap his stomach and say to it, "Rumble all you want, by Allah, you will not taste oil until the Muslim children are fed." One night, patrolling the streets in incognito, he heard children crying. He found the mother boiling a pot of water and rocks just to trick them into thinking food was coming, so they can fall asleep. She didn't know he was Caliph. She looked at the sky and said, "Allah will judge between us and Umar. He sleeps while we starve." Umar didn't reveal himself. He ran back to the treasury. He loaded a heavy sack of flour and cooking fat onto his own back. His servant Aslam tried to carry it. Umar refused, shouting, "Will you carry my sins for me on the day of judgment?" He carried it to her house. He cooked the food himself, blowing into the fire until the smoke filled his beard. He watched the children eating from a distance until they laughed and fell asleep. Only then did he leave. He told his servant, "Hunger kept them awake. I did not want to leave until I saw them happy." 10 years. For 10 years, Umar carried the burden. He conquered Egypt, defeated the Persians, broke the Romans, and established justice that became the envy of the world. But he knew his time was coming in his final Hajj. In his final Hajj, he lay down, looked at the moon, and prayed, "My flock has become large, and my strength has weakened. Take me to you, unblamed, without having wasted my trust." It happened in the place he loved most, the prayer, the niche of the Prophet ﷺ. It was Fajr prayer. Umar straightened the rows, he said Allahu Akbar, and then the dagger struck. Abu Lu'lu'a, a Magian slave with a grudge, stabbed him 3 times with a double-edged poisoned dagger. Umar collapsed. The assassin ran through the mosque, stabbing 13 others before killing himself. As Umar lay bleeding, his stomach open, the milk that he previously drank was flowing out of him. His first question wasn't about his assassin or the succession. He asked, "Did a Muslim kill me?" When they told him it was a non-Muslim, he said, "Praise be to Allah that He did not make my death at the hand of a man who prostrated to Him even once." Ibn Abbas came to comfort him, listing his achievements. "You accompanied the Prophet and were a good companion. You conquered cities." Umar stopped him and said, "As for what you see of my anxiety, it is for you and your companions. By Allah, if I had the earth full of gold, I will offer it as a ransom for the punishment of Allah before I saw it." He asked his son Abdullah to place his cheek on the dusty floor, saying, "Woe to Umar and woe to Umar's mother if Allah does not forgive him." Then his final wish. He asked permission from Aisha to be buried next to his two best friends, the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr. He said, "Do not say the commander of the faithful asks. Say Umar seeks permission." Aisha, who wanted that spot for herself, gave it up for him. When the news came back that she agreed, Umar smiled. "There was nothing more important to me than that sleeping place." Umar ibn al-Khattab died as he lived, accountable. He left behind a council to choose the next caliph, refusing to appoint his own son. He established a system of government, a treasury, a judiciary, and a military that would last for centuries. But his legacy isn't in the bureaucracy, it's in the standard he set. He was the ruler who walked while his servant rode, the conqueror who cleaned the floor of Al-Aqsa with his own hands, the giant who cooked for a widow in the middle of the night. When he died, the companion Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman said, "He was a closed door between the Ummah and Fitna. Now that door is broken. It will never be closed again." Umar was the strength of Islam. He was the barrier. And with his death, the door to civil war was kicked open. The caliphate would continue, but the unity that Umar held together with his bare hands was about to be tested like never before. Next, we turn to the man who inherited this impossible legacy, the man of two lights, Uthman ibn Affan.